What is the hardest hitless run? This is a question I've been asked a lot, and it's been a long time since I've made a tier list. Let's dive into what Soulsborne game is the most difficult on a zero-hit run. I won't include marathons of multiple games at once, and I'm only going to focus on challenges I've personally completed. We're also limiting the comparisons to just required content, or in speedrunning terms, any percent. Kicking us off with number 1, we have none other than Dark Souls 2. One of the most methodical runs in the entire lineup of Souls games. Though the movement controls sometimes feel janky due to the 8-directional movement as well as the less than tight turning radius, the enemies in Dark Souls 2 are very predictable for the most part and have extremely low health relative to your damage output from the very beginning of the game. Pair that with OP buffs like the passive bonus from the Seldora set that gives a large % increase of souls for enemies killed, and you have a very straightforward run on your hands. A couple fallbacks to mention that make this run less fun than others was that you're highly incentivized to use the bow due to the high volume of enemies and dense areas surrounding you. The hardest boss in this game for any percent was Throne Watcher and Defender by far, but luckily with poison and dark arrows, you can make quick work of them without getting too close for comfort. Ironically, Dark Souls 2 would be near the top of the list if I had actually done the all-boss run including DLC. Following Dark Souls 2 as the second easiest game I have done a hitless challenge on is none other than Dark Souls 1. Unlike its sequels, the original Dark Souls has a huge disadvantage when it comes to rings. You get 50% more damage than normal with the red Tearstone ring, as opposed to only 20% with its Dark Souls 2 and 3 counterparts. Pair that with the flip ring, otherwise known as Darkwood Grain Ring, and you have become a glass cannon gymnast in under 30 minutes of gameplay. And the rolling distance is much farther than normal. The elements of Dark Souls 1 that make it harder than 2 is mainly the boss fights are harder, and gravity is looming around every corner, waiting for you to fall into its endless abyss. You can even literally fall into the abyss and die if you don't remember the Artorias ring, which I'm embarrassed to say I've done far too many times while streaming the game. I'm sure many of you remember Ornstein and Smo as one of the most difficult bosses that slam-jammed you into a noob cake supreme many times before completion. In the hitless run, your damage is insane on them, and they still eat runs left, right, and center. Now we're going to kick up the difficulty a bit for the next tier. Bloodborne is the kingpin of this territory, with a whole new bag of tricks and some new mechanics like limb staggers and popping pellets to become super strong, but dying much quicker from attacks. Because the starting weapon of Bloodborne, the Saw Cleaver, is almost unmatched in every challenge and speedrun I've heard of, and the lack of total setup for the run, you can quite literally get right into the action and make improvements to the character seamlessly along the way with little to no downtime as you rush through the streets of Yharnam and spiral deeper into the Hunter's Dream. The Bloodborne any percent run is ranked in this spot due to how incredibly short it is. It can be completed in about an hour or less with ease, as opposed to its predecessors in Dark Souls 3. The game also only has 8 required bosses for the hitless run. The Wet Nurse as a final boss is kinda campy and requires almost no rolling whatsoever. Just nice spacing and running punishes on attack recoveries. Later on in Bloodborne's routing, people also figured out that you can cancel the nightmare phase of the nurse, making it laughably easier, as this was the biggest drawback to the fight to begin with. The main difficulty is Shadows of Yharnam, a fight that's right in the middle of the run and reminds me a lot of Lord of the Rings, just less fun. The Nazgul Shadows will literally stretch Armstrong your ass across the map like their whole life's purpose was planned around that exact moment. Not to mention if you don't execute the exact order in killing them, you may have stretchy arms and much more to worry about. Leaving the shadow that has the candle in his hand to last gives you a nice loop that can be punished with delayed attacks to finish it off, but it still makes me sweat bullets to this day. Dark Souls 3 is up next, boasting a ton of improvement mechanically along with much more complexity in enemy design and movesets. You have seen Dancer of the Boreal Valley, right? She's a goddamn Beyblade. The sad thing is that Dancer's still kinda easy on this run too. The Sellsword Twin Blades are the shining star of the run, and it's safe to say you'll have no problem melting the much larger health pools of these enemies with near-max upgrades being available by the halfway point or earlier. I remember the time where the community hadn't fully adopted this weapon yet. Most of us were still using the Astora's Straight Sword. The two weapons are in different leagues, but even with the Sellswords, the game is still going to give you the run for your money. The bosses like Soul of Cinder, which is a literal game shark with legs, can even parry you, which is the method that is used to make Gwyn in the first game a cakewalk. I guess Miyazaki took some notes this time around. The final fight with Cinder was so hard for me when learning this game that I remember practicing 30 minutes every night before bed on top of the daily streams just to keep up to speed with the rest of the boss fights. Demon Souls brings us to a new level of the tier list, and unfortunately not for good reasons. Even with its remake and having played both versions for hundreds of hours combined, it just seems to laugh in the face of fairness by giving you the most god-awful controls I've ever experienced in an action RPG game. On its surface, it may look super similar to the others, but add in rolling the wrong way when trying to do the opposite, insanely sketchy AI, those roly-poly skeleton douchebags in the Shrine of Storms, and Flame Lurker. Well, let's just say I don't blame you if you're already breaking out a fresh block of cheese to weasel your way through it all. One of the worst feelings in this game is practicing for runs and realizing you have to run literal miles back to your soul because some of the areas are the size of a small city with no checkpoints between the archstones. The brutal and primitive nature of Demon Souls left me not even completing a hitless run of the game. Instead, I waited till the remake, and I ended up getting 0 damage overall, which was even worse. We're gonna keep it in the tier list either way because I have intimate memories of rage quitting this and considering therapy afterwards. To add alongside Demon Souls, on the second tier from the top, I choose our new, cooler friend, Elden Ring. I understand some people will heavily disagree with this, as there are wild builds that make it look like a candy shop. But with the any % route using Serpent Hunter and adjusting to the new things after my first playthrough, I felt this game offers a lot more layers than ever before. The beautiful thing is it functions how it should for the most part, and is the most structurally sound, unlike Demon Souls. This made it the most fun to run overall, with the only downside being how long it takes to set up since the open world incentivizes looting before cahooting. Notable bosses like Radagon, Godfrey, Rykard, and Malekith give a much grander presence, like some of the pinnacle fights of the previous games, and it's only any %. I can't imagine how the DLC will be once it releases. If you've done the math at this point, I'm sure you can predict which game ranks at number 1. The game that even a journalist himself claimed he turned on cheat codes for because the ending was too hard. We're talking Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice. Sekiro is by far one of the coolest things I've lived to witness in gaming, and the fact that it got Game of the Year made me so happy. The mechanics are extremely fast-paced. It's a game that almost requires you to get good if you want to complete it. No co-op summons, no leveling, no magic, and no shenanigans, said Miyazaki when he birthed this masterpiece. The amount of deflects you have to perform perfectly in this to take down your enemies is on another level. The run in particular I did was not only hitless, but I also took no fall damage, didn't block, and also used no Akko Sugar that lowered health in trade for damage. I also completed it in the Immortal Severance ending, which means I had to fight the hardest boss to finish the game, Sword Saint Ishin. All the perfect deflects and reactions led up to a showdown where an old man that's way too cocky busts out a Mach 10 in the middle of a lightning storm and tries to light you up, but you don't even have a gun. I was salty, but I was also sold at the same time. I knew after the first playthrough that the final fight would rip me a new one, and that it did. I lost several runs right at the end to so many things on Ishin, and even when the practice was good and I was in the groove, a single deflect that was mistimed was not allowed. This meant that unlike runs that allowed blocking, our whole community had their eyes peeled like hawks, including me, and it raised the intensity a ton. If you guys enjoy videos like this and want to see more discussions, comment below what I should talk about next, hit the notification bell for future videos, and subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you soon.